r/AskREDDIT. What's the most inappropriate time you laughed? A woman got on stage to sing during a friend's wedding as part of the ceremony. It was naturally a song the bride and groom chose. As soon as she opened her mouth, it became clear that she absolutely tone deaf. It sounded like an animal being tortured. I was trying not to laugh, but two guys behind me started laughing and it set off a chain reaction of laughter. Even the groom was red-faced from trying not to laugh. She just kind of sheepishly left the stage afterward. Years ago when I was at the academy, one of our classmates did not make it to graduation. So we asked her to come back and sing the national anthem at our graduation ceremony. She had a really great voice and I offered to print out the lyrics for her because it can be a tricky song. She said she didn't need it, she had this down. And then come graduation, she fucked up the words so bad, I couldn't help but laugh. It was the saddest thing. We are all standing at attention with our hands in our hearts, facing the flag, and doing everything we can not to laugh because she completely screwed up the words. At my grandaunt's funeral, she was a big, jolly food lover while alive and is sorely missed. Everything was going along, lots of tears while the vicar was giving the eulogy, until he shared her last words, "Come on. A little whipped cream isn't going to kill me." I lost my shit. This was 10 years ago and I still feel terrible for laughing. My grandma died 2 years ago at 94 and for years she'd been warning everyone that she could die any minute. She was quite healthy for her age. One Christmas she told me which reading I would do at her funeral. One Easter when my uncle from the other side of the family was telling her about his 95-year-old mother, my grandma told him the government should just kill everyone at 95 and get it over with. So her impending death a family joke for over 10 years. Then at her funeral, which she had planned every detail of years before, they played "I'll Fly Away," which is a really dancey, joyous song about dying. It was so her. My sister and I made eye contact and after that we lost it. We were trying to cover our mouths and faces but our shoulders were shaking, so my cousins behind us thought we were crying and tried to comfort us. Eventually we were laughing so hard we were crying, so it evened out. We were at my uncle's funeral whose death was a surprise. I was standing with my cousin who just came back from abroad to attend her dad's funeral and was breaking down. My aunt, the deceased sister, came to tell my cousin that someone we know is apologizing for not being able to attend the funeral because she's in the hospital due to a car accident. My aunt went on describing the woman's very difficult condition and how she had an iron pole stuck into her forehead. 10 minutes later, the woman appears through the door in perfect health with just some scratches. My cousin sees her and look at me from the other side of the crowded silent room and we both can't stop laughing for the rest of the funeral. Cadaver room. One of my classmates accidentally stuck his finger in a kidney because he thought it was behind glass and tried to poke the glass. He was like, "Squish, oh frick." Someone told me the first memory he had of childhood was of being hungry. I also laughed, thinking it was a joke, but it turned out it was about him being so poor. He and his brother were always hungry growing up. My friend's dad was driving us to go camping. He told a story about how he got in a car crash and died on the way to the hospital, only to be brought back. I laughed nervously cause I wasn't sure how to react and he took it as me laughing at him and got offended. At the time, I couldn't explain why I laughed. That was an awkward car ride. Me and a friend were altar boys. An older woman took to the podium to read a Bible passage. The passage described how Jesus loves everyone, the sick and the healthy, the rich and the poor, the circumcised and the uncircumcised. That's all it took for a pair of 10-year-old boys to start laughing hysterically in front of a packed church. Group therapy. A kid, 22 or so but you get the idea, was talking passionately about his struggles with Asperger's and OCD. He had a squeaky voice. He started talking about his OCD categories: things that belonged under the earth, things that belonged on the earth, things that belonged in the water, and things that belonged in space. He named specific objects: rocks, bugs, etc. He said there were some things he could not fit neatly into his categories, even if they seemed like they were supposed to be in one. This distressed him. He bemoaned cars. He bemoaned women and pointed at one. Then with no segue, announced that the reason he was there was because he snuck into the zoo at night and leapt into the lion enclosure. I had to bury my face in my elbow and turn away. Of course his problems were real, but it just seemed so out of place on a day when people were talking about who diddled them when. This was at a ballet school performance. It was for kids ranging from 5 to 16-year-olds. For one of the younger age groups they did this thing where one kid pranced from one corner of the stage to the other, And then another kid would do the opposite, in a big X pattern. And they would have these gigantic shit-eating grins on their faces. Just horribly precious. Well, I started losing it at about the 15th kid, but it went on for like 40 children. By the end I was in tears, and all the other adults in the audience near me had found it contagious, so everyone was just sitting there laughing at their own children. A young teenager was leaning forward in a chair at a restaurant, lost traction, and slammed their face into the table. Absolute hysterical sobbing ensued. Their parents stopped eating their salads to make sure they were okay. They were, aside from a nosebleed. I was sitting at the table next to them and cracked the fuck up at the sound of them hitting the table, and even more when they started crying. I was a horrible human being in that moment. Feel bad after the fact, but in the moment it tickled me to my core. A few years ago I was participating in a religious ceremony with my extended family. I'm not that religious, but my mom and her family are, so I agreed to participate. I was tasked with reading one of the sections aloud and had to read off a list of titles of the Virgin Mary. Most of them were pretty straightforward: Queen of the Angels, Queen Most Holy, etc. But there's one section that starts with the word Virgin. I get to it and I'm trying not to smirk, but as soon as I said the phrase Virgin Most Powerful, I glanced at my brother and my so, and they were grinning at me. Their grins caused me to burst into giggles and I had to excuse myself while my mom glared knives into me. My brother continued the rest of the reading. I was once hired to sing at a funeral, and right before I was called up, the little boy in front of me ripped the loudest fart. I dug my face into my lady friend's shoulder and my whole body trembled as I tried to keep it together. Within seconds I was at the pulpit and trying to come up with what I would do if I broke out laughing. I sang to the best of my ability at the time, with a cough every now and then. We left immediately afterwards and laughed in the car till we couldn't breathe. Not the most inappropriate, but when I started my job on L&D, someone was telling another person about a woman whose baby had died. The first person asked, "Oh my God, what happened?" And the second person said it died, and it made me laugh a little because of course it died. The woman wanted to know how. Second was, a nurse approached me recently and asked me to call someone to fix a bed because we were moving a patient in it and it folded and she got stuck in the bed and I lost it. I laughed so hard. This is a bad one. We were watching a news report on coronavirus and this lady was talking about her dead mother or grandmother. She was saying adjectives about how she looked when she died. She was this, she was that, and then I hear the legendary line, "She was dead, obviously." Wasn't that funny? But I started chuckling and my family noticed. I tried to stop but actually couldn't. Had to excuse myself after they continued to make statements which I found hilarious. Funniest and most evil 10 minutes of my year. I was getting scolded by a teacher and just started to laugh. She wrote a note and told me to get it signed by my parents. Went back home and gave the note to my dad. He started scolding me and then I started laughing again. I'll spare you the details of what happened after that. Was working at a sign shop and me and this other guy were drilling holes into some wood paneling when the other guy said, "Hey look," and acted like he was going to drill into the side of his head. The drill bit he was using was one of those flat and wide ones used for boring larger holes, and while it was spinning it grabbed a hold of his hair, ripped out a chunk, and left a perfectly round $half-sized bald spot on the side of his head. I had to set down whatever I was doing since I was laughing so hard, and I kept apologizing to him for doing so. He told me the next day that his girlfriend reacted the same way I did. After the most horrible terrorist attack in our country's history, I was in class with some people who survived it, and one of these was a really fat girl. She was telling the story about how she survived, and it included a part where she said that she rolled down a hill, and despite the seriousness of the situation, I couldn't stop myself from laughing at the thought of her actually rolling down a hill. Yes, I know I'm going to hell. My daughter was in probably first or second grade and she was doing an online math homework where she had to answer a bunch of math questions and it would give her percentage correct at the end and then re-ask the ones she missed. She was down to one question and got it wrong, so she got 0% correct. She bust out crying because she got 0%, and for some reason I thought that was so funny that I bust out laughing and couldn't stop. And then she got even madder and cried harder because I was laughing at her, which made me laugh harder, which made her cry harder. Cousin's wedding, first Catholic wedding I've attended. At some point my cousin and the groom sat there while the pastor, in a very stern tone, told them that they must be there for each other, must love each other, must do this, must do that, etc. Nothing bad per se, but this scolding tone. All the weddings I've attended up to this point were lighthearted, and then I saw these two sit there pretty much being yelled at by a pastor. So naturally, the absurdity of this situation made me laugh. Soon my fiancé started to laugh, then my mom, followed by my sister. My dad takes church very serious and just refused to see the humor. At high school graduation during the diplomas, I had no idea one of my classmates' last name was McDonald and I involuntarily let out a ha when his name was called. Everyone looked at me and I felt like a major dick. I have two. 1. An elderly customer, like 80-ish, was pushing a cart and fell over in slow motion, the cart falling on top of him. I took my lunch break and laughed the entire 30 minutes. 2. The worst one, when my older half-sister found out her uncle was murdered. I have absolutely no idea why I laughed. I guess it's because, while I knew what death was, I couldn't process murder and didn't know how to react, and I still feel bad about it years later. Children cursing. It's really funny to hear and catches me so off guard. I just start laughing, hard to discipline them and convince them they shouldn't say those words. When you're laughing you're behind off. One of our friends' grandma just passed. We had her over so she had someone to talk to. Her grandma developed bad schizophrenia and didn't recognize her husband, so our friend's grandpa, nor her daughter and her husband with whom she lived. Our friend went on to describe one particularly dramatic evening when grandma started to throw dishes at grandpa since, well, she didn't recognize him. He had to dodge all those plates and glasses, which I had to picture and found somewhat amusing. Then our friend mentioned that her poor grandpa is wheelchair-bound and now I had to imagine her grandpa frantically wheeling around to dodge flying dishes. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom where I completely lost it. Oh man, you just brought back a memory I wish to forget. In 7th grade we were watching a movie in English class. I wasn't paying any attention to the movie at all. I was drawing flags in my notebook all period. I look up to see a girl undressing, and being the asshole that I was I decided to whistle. It was a Holocaust movie. She was undressing for a gas chamber. The teacher was Jewish. I am a piece of shit. Got internal suspension and had to write an essay about the Holocaust. I still cringe thinking about it to this day. I wish I could tell the teacher that it wasn't intentional, but when you fuck up that badly a justification isn't even worth it. This crazy Seventh-day Adventist lady I used to know, was upset that her kids were getting bullied. Someone had punched her son in the dick, but the way she described it was they punched him in the genital. I had to pretend something was in my eye and go to the bathroom cause I couldn't stop laughing. I'm really not proud of that one. My girlfriend started laughing at a family dinner about how her dog ate her cat. Turns out it's true, and she can't talk about it without either sobbing or laughing. Most of us thought she was a psycho for a while, still love her to death though. Edit, forgot to add, her dad then took their dog out back and shot it. I was giving my husband head one night, and out of nowhere, he sighed, and said in the most relaxed and contented tone, "Ah, the blowjob. That old chestnut." I lost it. We were both in tears laughing and he still doesn't know why he said it. Now it's one of those things that pops into my head during serious work meetings and I have to try not to let myself start giggling cause I'll never stop.